Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paul's Body Engineering Podcast. I'm on a roll, people, I'm on a roll. So I thought I'd deliver another educational one. This week, it's a little bit different. And for those of you that actually get my newsletter that I email out, and if you're not on my newsletter database, please let me know because I'd love to add you on there. It's purely educational. I provide a lot of insight, a lot of inspiration, a lot of education in relation to information, and I'm a firm believer that education is the key to success when it comes to health and fitness. You can follow a program, you can follow a plan to the nth degree, but unless you're learning along the way and knowing how to implement it yourself, if that plan happened to be taken away, which is most people's prerogative, right? You're not going to sustain it, and you'll sort of fall back into old habits. So education and knowledge is very powerful indeed. But this week's one, or this week's podcast, it was last week's newsletter, is all about caffeine and the implementation or use of caffeine, because caffeine's, like in Australia in particular, I know I've got overseas listeners, but in Australia in particular, coffee, it's a big culture here in Australia. The morning coffee is almost as important in our lifestyle as putting on our shoes. Like it carries a lot of weight in terms of part of the morning and that morning time process. But the caffeine element of coffee has been around for years in terms of a stimulant and what it offers in regards to performance. So that's where I'm heading with today's topic. So picture this first and foremost, because there's a number of myriads here in terms of caffeine application. So imagine this and obviously, put yourself in this position if this is you, or if you can imagine that. You wake up in the morning and you're feeling pretty sluggish, and you think to yourself, man, I could easily sleep another hour or two. I feel tired. But you get up and you go, oh, I need coffee. That's the first thinking of the day, is I need coffee, because that is the go-to to get you going, right? You rely on that first shot of caffeine to kickstart your day. So you have that first cup of coffee, you have your breakfast, you're on your way. Then it starts to wane and you're starting to feel a little bit fatigued, a little bit flat, sort of mid-morning around, say, 10 a.m. So you have your second cup, if not, you haven't had it sooner. And then that carries you through to about lunchtime, you eat, and then it's the afternoon. And no matter what you're doing in terms of a job, you've got to get through that afternoon shift before you get home. And that's challenging, right? Because you are tired because you didn't have a good night's sleep. So you might have a 2 p.m. coffee, maybe a 1 p.m. coffee, something like that, just to get you through that afternoon. Maybe you've had an energy drink instead, just to punch on through that afternoon, to give you that kick so you can get to the finish line and then get on with the rest of the afternoon, whether you train in the morning, train in the afternoon, and then get home, finish up for the day. So that's a typical scenario for most people, right? It is very much a typical scenario. We rely on caffeine a lot, whether it's psychological or physiological, we still rely on it to get us through each and every day. But the caveat to this, actually it's more than the caveat, it's the catch-22, is that when we go back to the beginning of this story, waking up in the morning and feeling tired, 9 times out of 10, the reason you're feeling tired, other than obviously a poor night's sleep, is the fact that you had caffeine at 2 p.m. So if that's a typical day for you and you're having caffeine at 2 p.m., whether it's an energy drink, whether it's a green tea, whether it's a Red Bull, whether it's a cup of coffee, whether it's an iced latte, doesn't matter. If it's got caffeine in it, that caffeine can potentially, highly likely, impact your ability to get a good night's sleep, even though it's at 2 p.m. And the main reason being is that caffeine has a half-life. So the initial life of caffeine is immediate. You feel it pretty much straight away if you're not, obviously immune to stimulus or have a high threshold. But second to that, the half-life is anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, even longer depending on the strength. So if you have a cup of coffee at 2 p.m, there's likely still another 125 milligrams of caffeine in your system at 8 p.m. that night. Potentially longer. And again, it depends on the content. So if you've had an energy drink, like they're obviously stronger in terms of caffeine content. So it could be 10 p.m. that you've got 125 milligrams or even more in your system. So no wonder you are not sleeping correctly. No wonder you are waking up wanting to sleep more in the morning. And this can really impact your circadian rhythm and your sleeping patterns, because it gets to Friday night and it gets to Saturday morning and you sleep in Saturday morning, try and play catch up, right? You try and bank some sleep. So you'll wake up 7 a.m, 8 a.m, and feel somewhat rested. Same thing on Sunday. And then what happens? Monday, you've got to be up early again and you're tired again because you're sleeping in. You've shifted that sleeping block. You've shifted it forward. Okay, so you're sleeping more, but you're probably staying up later because it's a weekend, and next thing you know, Monday comes around, you've got to get up at 5 a.m. or whatever the time is that you've got to get up and start the week again, and you're back to square one. And then you're tired. So what happens? You have more coffee. And this just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. And we can, as human beings, develop a dependency on caffeine. There's no two ways about it. It can very much build a dependency. It's a drug at the end of the day. It's very much a legal drug, but it's still a drug. And it obviously is a very powerful one. Now, in terms of performance, there's two ways to look at this. The first one is that absolutely it can help with your performance, whether it's athletic, running, training in the gym, group fitness, what have you. It can stimulate you. There's no doubt about it. Okay, and that's why there is such a supplement now on the market as a pre-workout. It's a strong, potent pre-workout that contains a high level of caffeine. So you have that along with all the other chemicals in it, and it is immediately in your system, and you immediately, or should immediately, within probably first 15 to 20 minutes of consumption, feel the impact of it, and therefore be spurred on to train really hard. And that's great. And this goes back to my original point too, like if you're having a pre-workout at night time before you go to bed, you might be an afternoon trainer and you're having a pre-workout at night time. So you've got to be very careful because that's another element. I actually didn't disclose that in the opening comments. If you're not training until after work, say you're at the gym at 6:30 p.m. and you have a pre-workout, that means that you've still got caffeine in your system until midnight potentially, maybe even later. Now that can really ragdoll your sleeping quality. So yeah, I'd be very cautious and very careful on that. And the way to test the waters here is simply by scaling back on your caffeine content. If you've got a normal day, try not to have anything past midday. Okay, work backwards. All right, know when you're likely to go to bed. Everyone has a relatively similar bedtime, particularly through the week. So scale back from there. Try and set a benchmark of midday. No more in terms of caffeine, and maybe even drop by 1 or 2 cups. The other thing to consider too, and this is completely off topic, is that every time you make a coffee, if it's got milk in it, if it's got full cream, skim, coconut, oat, whatever it is, there's calories there that you can reduce. Okay, if you're going to scale back. But my point of this particular podcast is all about caffeine and its impact. Now, it's not the enemy. It's not a bad thing. Okay, it does help. But within reason, of course, just like anything else, within reason. And we've got to make sure that we understand that. And look, sleep is, I've come to realize that having done this for such a long period of time and work with so many people, sleep is probably the most forgotten thing that is important to us in terms of health and fitness. It is the most underrated thing that is important to us in terms of health and fitness, but it's also the most logical thing. Okay, if you want to be healthier, if you want to be fitter, if you want to be stronger, if you want to have more energy, if you want to think clearly, if you want to lose weight, if you want to train better, if you want to train more, if you want to have energy throughout the day, if you want to, think clearly and be the most efficient person you can be in terms of your job. If you're studying a master's degree at uni and you want that to turn out to be really good, you've got to get a good night's sleep. And it's not just one night, it's every night. So the importance of going to bed and actually falling asleep into a deep sleep is massive. I cannot understate this enough. And what caffeine does is you'll still go to sleep. Like I need to make that very clear. You'll still go to sleep because you'll obviously be physically tired and mentally tired, but caffeine keeps your brain ticking away. It keeps your nervous system ticking away. Your heart is probably still pumping out blood a lot faster than normal if you were in a normal rested state. So you might sleep, but it'll be a shallow sleep. It's not a deep sleep. And that can significantly impact your ability to wake up rested and restored. Okay, you would be fully aware when you've had a good night's sleep because you wake up and you think, oh wow, I actually feel pretty good. I'm energized, I'm not rubbing my eyes, I'm not slow to start, I'm thinking clearly, I'm good to go. you know you've had a good night's sleep. But you also know when you've had a shit night's sleep, and you're slow to start, you're just struggling, the energy's not there, you make poor decisions, you skip the gym, you go for a dopamine hit on food, and this, you can see where a poor night's sleep can really have a negative impact on your lifestyle and your choices, right? It's amazing. So that's why I continually sort of support the fact, speak about the fact that that sleep is so important. It is integral. So, we often, we take on the whole Neanderthal, I guess, statement of, I can sleep when I'm dead, or I'll sleep later, or, I'm not soft, I'm not a pussy, I'm not, this, that, and everything else. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a bodybuilder and you want to grow muscle, you need sleep. If you're a male, and I am a big advocate for this, if you're a male and you want to improve your testosterone levels, okay? If you're trying to start a family and you need to improve your testosterone levels, or you need to improve your sperm count, things like that, you need to get better sleep. It is so important. You can't sacrifice sleep to work harder, or, and there's an argument here, because some people will kick back and go, hang on a second, you keep telling me I've got to train more, and the only way I can do it is get up at 4 a.m. Absolutely. There is a balancing act here, and I completely support that, yes. But sometimes you have to sacrifice one to benefit the other, and vice versa. And that's the way you've got to look at it. And this is what we refer to as consistency. So 1 week you might prioritize sleep and only train 3 days. The following week you might be able to get in 5 days worth of training because you feel more rested, because your sleep is a priority. And that's why it's important to make sure that the sleep you're getting is quality sleep. It's not just sleep for the sake of, I got 6 hours last night, I'm good. Well, what did that 6 hours represent? What was that 6 hours actually doing for you? Did it actually help you? Or was it a case that you just had your eyes closed for 6 hours? Did your body actually restore itself? Did your muscles recover and repair? Did your heart rate lower down to a standard resting heart rate? It's a really important thing to really realize. Now, going back to caffeine and the implication of it, caffeine isn't the problem, and we need to make that very clear. It's very much a case of how late you're consuming it, right? And how that can impact your ability to not only get to sleep, but also have a good night's sleep, right? Because the example I gave earlier, right? If you're having, say, a pre-workout or a strong coffee at 2 p.m., like I said, there's potentially 125 milligrams of caffeine circulating through your system. That's the equivalent of around 2 espresso shots, to put it in sort of layman's terms. So, and that's while you're trying to go to sleep, okay? So by 10 p.m., that's what's potentially still in your system. And you might say, I can fall asleep just fine after caffeine. And most people say that, they fall asleep just fine. But it's the quality of sleep that you're getting. Everyone falls asleep when they're tired, right? When they're physically or mentally tired, you generally can get to sleep. But the difference between a good night's sleep and a poor night's sleep isn't falling asleep. It's the depth of the sleep. It's the quality of the sleep. It's waking up feeling rested, or waking up feeling like you could have slept for longer, right? So yeah, big difference there. But this is a constant cycle that people go through. They will constantly rely on caffeine to get them through the day, having it after midday, therefore keeping them awake at night. They wake up in the morning, one of the first things they reach for is caffeine because they're tired, and then the cycle goes over again. So the goal isn't necessarily to eliminate caffeine, it's to use it strategically. Use it as a pre-workout, yes, if you train in the morning. In the afternoon, you might need something different to get you going, okay? But it is incredibly important to ensure that you get a good night's sleep for the reasons I've given. If your objective, as I said, is to lose weight, if your objective is to get fitter, if it's to get healthy, if it's to get stronger, if it's to be more present and more available for your kids and not slouch around on the couch all day, these are the things that you need to prioritize. Therefore, sleep evolves around all of those things, is involved and aligns with all of those things, okay? But if you can back off your caffeine and eliminate some of it, look, it's going to be tough at the beginning, okay? One of the easiest ways to break this cycle is to reduce your caffeine intake over a weekend. Cut it early in the day, prioritize a couple of quality nights sleep, okay? You may feel tired at first, but that's often a sign you've been masking fatigue rather than addressing it. So we don't eliminate the caffeine, we use it strategically. Less caffeine late in the day often means better sleep, better recovery, better training sessions, and more consistent energy throughout the day. And as a bonus, that means that your morning coffee, when you do have it, actually starts working properly again. Because we can often get to a point where caffeine, our threshold to caffeine and coffee and stimulants is null and void. Like, you know, you have a cup of coffee and then you think, oh, well, that didn't really do much, I'm going to have another one. You know, and the pre-workout is exactly the same. I know guys that have like 3 or 4 scoops of pre-workout simply because their tolerance is so high, they're not feeling the effects of 1 scoop, which is the recommended dose. So they double or triple down to try and get that kick. So often you do need to wean off it for it to be truly effective. So I think that's the point of this message. Caffeine is not the enemy. Caffeine is not a bad thing, or coffee is not a bad thing, depending on which way you're looking at it, but it's when you have it and how you have it that is important. So I think I'll wrap it up there. I think that is the message that came across really, really well. But as I said at the very start, if you're interested in learning more and just general education, no hard sells, no spiels, no, you know, anything like that, let me know and join up to my newsletter, because, you know, I firmly am proud of what I put out in terms of content. I try and do one a week, and it's always a relevant topic. You know, I did one not that long ago about GLP-1s. That was relevant. There's caffeine. There's all sorts of stuff that we talk about, and you know, you can implement that into your own well-being and your own lifestyle, and potentially make a big, big difference, like caffeine can for you at the moment. So I will finish up there, but thank you once again for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you're interested in any of my coaching services, please jump on paulsbodyengineering.com. Have a look around. If it doesn't make sense, not that I'm not saying it's confusing, but you never know. You might just go, you know what, that doesn't quite answer my question, and that's okay. DM me, email me, let me know if I can help further, because you know, I'm here to help. And obviously, if you just want to have a chat, there's no obligation. You know, I don't bite, that's for sure. I'm happy to help, and even if you don't want my service, at least I can point you in the right direction of where you may benefit. All right, but with that being said, as I say to every client every single day, have a great day.